1 Chronicles chapter 25. David and the army commanders then appointed men from the families of Asaph, Heman and Jeduthun to proclaim God's messages to the accompaniment of lyres, harps and cymbals. Here's a list of their names and their work. From the sons of Asaph there were Zachar, Joseph, Nethaniah and Asarallah. They worked under the direction of their father Asaph, who proclaimed God's messages by the king's orders. From the sons of Jeduthun there were Gedaliah, Zeri, Jeshiah, Shimei, Hashabiah and Mattitiah, 6 in all. They worked under the direction of their father Jeduthun, who proclaimed God's messages to the accompaniment of the lyre, offering thanks and praise to the Lord. From the sons of Heman there were Bukiah, Mattaniah, Uzziel, Shubael, Jeremoth, Hananiah, Eliatath, Gedalti, Romamti-Ezer, Josh Bekashah, Malothi, Hother, and Mahazioth. All these were the sons of Heman, the king's seer, for God had honoured him with 14 sons and 3 daughters. All these men were under the direction of their fathers. As they made music at the house of the Lord, their responsibilities included the playing of cymbals, harps and lyres at the house of God. Asaph, Jeduthun and Heman reported directly to the king. They and their families were all trained in making music before the Lord, and each of them, 288 in all, was an accomplished musician. The musicians were appointed to their term of service by means of sacred lot, without regard to whether they were young or old, teacher or student. The first lot fell to Joseph of the Asaph clan and 12 of his sons and relatives. The second lot fell to Gedaliah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The third lot fell to Zachar and 12 of his sons and relatives. The fourth lot fell to Zeri and 12 of his sons and relatives. The fifth lot fell to Nethaniah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The sixth lot fell to Bukiah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The seventh lot fell to Asarallah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The eighth lot fell to Jeshiah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The ninth lot fell to Mattaniah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 10th lot fell to Shimei and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 11th lot fell to Uzziel and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 12th lot fell to Hashabiah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 13th lot fell to Shubael and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 14th lot fell to Mattitiah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 15th lot fell to Jeremoth and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 16th lot fell to Hananiah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 17th lot fell to Josh Bekashah and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 18th lot fell to Hanani and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 19th lot fell to Malothi and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 20th lot fell to Eliatha and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 21st lot fell to Hother and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 22nd lot fell to Gedalti and 12 of his sons and relatives. The 23rd lot fell to Mahazioth and 12 of his sons and relatives. And the 24th lot fell to Romamti-Ezer and 12 of his sons and relatives.